So there's this show on Netflix called Dahmer.
Yeah.
And some people have seen it, including us, so let's talk about it. We're real late to the party on this. I know everyone and their mother has seen this at this point. We're busy. We're busy. We're watching a lot of stuff.
Busy.
And we always try to get to this, and we were watching like an episode a night, and then it got pushed and this and that. And we watched 4 friggin' episodes a day. We're like, no, we're finishing it. And so here we go. Let's talk spoilers about Dahmer.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone's seen it. I don't think there's any reason to do anything spoiler free here. So this was created by Ryan Murphy, who's behind American Horror Story and American Crime Story. They did The People vs. O.J. Simpson. They did the Gucci story. They've done some stuff that deals with true crime. And, with the O.J. Simpson one, which I had watched, that stuff was super accurate to what was happening in that. Now, I said Gucci. I meant Versace, sorry. With the Versace stuff, I don't know that story. So I don't know how accurate it was, but with how accurate they were keeping the O.J. Simpson one and how accurate they kept this Dahmer one, I can only assume that the Versace one was also pretty accurate. But man, if you guys haven't seen like the photos of Jeffrey Dahmer's apartment and to match them with the ones in the show,
they're recreated perfectly.
Like they got in a time machine and they actually went to his apartment. It's incredible how exact to every detail it is. Mm-hmm. It's
wild,
meticulous beyond comprehension. I was looking at it I thought they were set photos. And it's like, no, that's his actual apartment. And I was like, they got the poster, they got the carpet, they got the couch, they got the TV, the dresser, everything is exactly the same.
Yes.
It's really, really wild.
Yeah.
Anyways, so Evan Peters, or Peter Evans, as Kaylee likes to call him.
I'm calling him that. He's got 2 first names in his name.
He likes to play serial killers.
Yeah.
And girls don't know what to do with that.
He needs to play fictional serial killers only.
They want to find him hot in peace, and while he's playing Dahmer, they feel very uncertain about their feelings.
No, there's no uncertainty.
They're like, I don't like this. Like I know him as the actor. I like him and what he's doing here. First thing I want to say about this show, I think it's excellent. Now, I completely understand anybody's objection to something like this being made, especially people who were involved in this, family members or whatever. I totally get that. But it is a part of history, right? And we recreate history all the time in film. It's one of the most done things in cinema, television series and whatnot. I mean, we watched Chernobyl, right? And that is one of the most horrific events in the history of ever. Mm-hmm. And people died horrendously. And it was because of other people's negligence. It was because of monsters. Like, the people who were trying to cover up Chernobyl, to me, are just as bad as Jeffrey Dahmer or John Wayne Gacy or any of these guys. These guys are complicit in the murder of people and don't have a conscience on it, and all they really care about is themselves. They're monsters, right? So we can cover Chernobyl, we can cover the Holocaust, we can cover all of these horrendous events because, we want to feel like we have some kind of connection to these events, and I don't know if it's entertainment. I don't know if that's the right word.
No, I don't think that it's tough because, as you're saying, with people that are involved and just anybody in general that would object to the dramatization of a serial killer's, life, it's not really entertainment because it's sort of more like a car crash, right? Like humans have this morbid curiosity for other humans that are abnormal, especially when they're doing horrendous things, because it's really hard sometimes to imagine, we watch obviously horror all the time and we see insane things happen on film, but it's there is such a difference whenever you know that something like that truly, not even something like that, it exactly happened, that very crime was committed on a real life person. And so I think people have that morbid curiosity where you just kind of, you want to know why. And I think that this show, especially in the last episode, addresses this, where like you won't get an answer. There's so many things that can happen in the world, and there's so much evil out there that there isn't an explanation for, at least not a satisfying one. Whether you can like examine somebody's brain, post-mortem to see if there's any like physical abnormalities that you can point to, or if you can look at family interaction and history and find a reason there. Like, it's still, even knowing that like, oh yeah, that's what was wrong with this person, it doesn't bring back the victims, it doesn't heal the damage that's been done for generations now. So it's a very complicated problem, I guess you could say, as far as whether or not, I think it's history, so I think that it is valid to have the shows like this and like Chernobyl out there. But the difference too with Dahmer versus Chernobyl is that we really are focused on Dahmer. There is focus obviously on the victims, which I think the show does very, very well. But because it's a single person, like, there's definitely moments in the show where I wouldn't say I was like sympathetic towards him, but you feel bad for him. Like, there are times in, the way that he's treated when he's younger, and just certain things that you're like, man, if only he had been supported more, or been more like cared for and had friends or whatever, like, would that have changed anything? And there's no way to know, right? Like, that might not have changed anything at all. But it's tough, because he still is just so evil, and there really is no excuse for what he did to these people.
I think it's very important to note, though, that when we discuss the Jeffrey Dahmer case through the way of this television series, that anything that we're saying about Dahmer, about the victims, about the events, about Dahmer's father, his mother, any of that stuff, we are really mostly only talking about it through the lens of this show's depiction of those events and characters, right? Mm-hmm. So, we'll never know fully. The show doesn't let us know, but we sure as hell know even less because we weren't there. Mm-hmm. And there's always going to be artistic liberties to scenes because there wasn't anyone there. Dahmer can give whatever account he wants. Yeah. He can sit down and he can detail out every single thing. This can just be hearsay, right? This can just be him making shit up. Who knows? He's a psychopath. I don't know if that's a clinical diagnosis or not. I don't know what he would be clinically diagnosed as, but, a blanket statement of psycho works for me. Because it's an easily categorizable thing. Mm-hmm. And it's easy for us to be like, he's just insane, right? And just kill him, right? That'll solve the problem. But I think that, when we are talking about the show, it is an important note to know that we can only speak upon and towards the depictions that were given to us. What actually happened, that's between the people who were actually there and it actually happened to. But I can say, objectively, that the performances are phenomenal by everybody. Richard Jenkins, Evan Peters or Peter Evans, the woman who plays his neighbor, who I don't know her actual name, her real name. Yeah. But she, what's her name? Gail. Gail. They say something. Phenomenal. She's phenomenal.
Oh my goodness.
The kid who plays the deaf the deaf guy, freaking Molly Ringwald, who plays Jeffrey Dahmer's stepmother. You've got Penelope Ann Miller, who plays his real mother. Just amazing all across the board. All of his victims, the family members. Fantastic. So, they really did a great job there. They did a really great job of structuring this show. And man, just I think that we should just kind of go back and forth because it is a 10-episode show. It's 10 hours long. We can only speak so much on it. But I think we should just kind of pick a few moments that really hit with us, that are really important and had that impact. Obviously, everything was terrible. Like, everything he did was awful. Everything hits hard.
Yeah.
There's those big moments, though, right? Where the 14-year-old boy, which is something I knew, but the 14-year-old boy who did managed to escape after having a hole drilled into his head and acid poured onto his brain, and he's sitting out there and he's so dazed, his brain is literally like melting, and they're sitting out front trying to tell the cops, that this kid, this child, this 14-year-old boy, is injured and whatever, and Dahmer comes in and they escort him back in, and it's that whole scene is just so unreal. And then for it to be not only end capped in that episode with the phone call that she gives, and they're just like saying the most asinine stuff of like, it's a boyfriend situation.
Yes.
And it's handled, and oh no, we did everything we could, and no, that's an adult. And
oh my God.
they didn't check IDs. They didn't go and check on him again. They did. It's like, it's every bit of incompetence, gross incompetence that you could possibly, comprehend. Not even comprehend.
It's so, and like, I mean, it's homophobic, it's racist, it just is, it's awful. And then those very cops, at the end, they get awarded.
Not only are they reinstated.
They're reinstated, they get like a little slap on the wrist, and then they become officers of the year. Which, when that scene happened, I was like, there's no fucking way. Like, seriously? How could that even be? It's mind-boggling. Like, I cannot wrap my brain around it.
I'm shocked that Jesse Jackson wasn't there for that. After he was like, we're going to fight this fight and this fight and this fight and next and next and next forever. It's like, I'm shocked. Maybe he was. Maybe there's some protests outside we didn't see. I don't know. But those guys winning an award for how good they are as cops.
Oh my God. It's so upsetting. And, that's, so like throughout the show, obviously, like, there's, I think that they keep going back to like asking, like, once Dahmer's caught, like, if he was targeting these neighborhoods and these communities because they were disenfranchised and, ignored by people. But even if he wasn't doing that intentionally, like, it really just highlights how there are people in our society who even still to this day are overlooked, are ignored.
He got away with it because he was doing it there.
Yeah.
Whether or not he was purposely doing it there remains to be seen, and will always remain to be seen.
Yeah.
But he was getting away with it because the cops didn't give a shit about the people in that area. Yeah.
And it's so depressing. It's definitely, one of those things that when you're watching it and kind of making the connections that it still goes on today, it's very defeating. It's definitely one of those things that makes you like question the goodness of humans.
Yeah.
So
the stuff with his dad is really, really tough because, a lot, and everyone's going to have their opinion on this, right? This is one of those very hot button topics, right? Where people are very divisive and like, decisive as well, right? They're not only divided, but they're also very decisive about the way they feel about things, right? There's some people like me who are kind of more torn and don't know exactly, if it's more connected to me specifically, right? If it's like Dahmer killed my daughter, then of course the vengeful side of me would be overtaking any logic center of my brain, and I would just be like lashing out irrationally. I want him dead. I'm going to kill him myself, kind of thing. when it comes to Lionel, it's, you know, from what we see in the show, what he was in real life, I don't know. Maybe he was molesting him. Maybe he was beating him. Maybe, who knows?
Yeah.
I don't know. You know, they say that on Geraldo, I think is what that person's on, when he calls into the show and is like, you know, I used to go over there all the time, and his stepmother was like screaming at him, and his father was molesting him. And like, I don't know. Maybe that did happen. The way they depict it in the show, though, that is not what happened.
Yes.
The way it's depicted in the show, if this is an accurate representation, probably isn't 100%, of course. Mm-hmm. In fact, of course it's not. But if it's close, this is definitely the most torn aspect of the show to me, especially as a father. You know, if one of my daughters was to be some monster, of course you're always going to blame yourself. You're never going to be able to let it go. You're never going to be able to stop thinking like, what if I did this? What if I did that? And his dad has some amazing moments here, with Dahmer, with himself, with his wife, when they're at dinner, all that stuff. And I really did feel a lot of different emotions.
I did too.
He's homophobic, yes.
Yeah.
There's a lot of homophobic fathers in the world.
Yes.
Their sons don't become serial killers, right? There's a lot of people who practice taxidermy. Kids who were introduced to taxidermy, they didn't become serial killers, right? So you can't just be like, you can't just blanket statement certain things like, oh man, well, if he wasn't a homophobe, you know, whatever. That's just not true. Now, whether or not that was the catalyst, who knows? Is that the fuel on the fire? As we'll never know any of that stuff.
Yeah.
But I do feel a lot while watching the scenes with Lionel. I think that he's an insanely compelling character and really does do a great job of illustrating what it's like to be the parent of a monster.
Yeah.
This is very well illustrated as well in a movie we watched maybe 6 months ago or something called Mass. Parents of a mass shooter talking to a victim's parents, and just them getting to know one another. And it's like, how did you not know? You know, that kind of stuff. And it's like, it was our child. We loved him. Like, love is blind sometimes, and you don't want to believe something's happening, especially when there wasn't as much focus as there is now on certain mental health issues and you know, whatnot. So his character really resonated with me the most, because I'm a father, and because you would be blinded by the love of your child. And do I think the way it's portrayed in the show that Lionel loved his son? 1,000%. There's no question in my mind that he genuinely loved his son. My relationship with this story and how I knew Dahmer's father was very little. Very little. In fact, I just painted him as a stereotypical bastard who made Dahmer what he is, you know, to a degree. Like, oh, he's a homophobe, so he just, you know, beat his son or whatever. Like, I just filled in the blanks because that's what's easy and that's what we know to be true stereotypically. But this depiction of him doesn't paint him like that at all. This is a compassionate man who's just very traditional and maybe somewhat oblivious, but you know, ultimately not a bad guy, just kind of maybe a lost. I shouldn't say lost. He was ill prepared for someone like Dahmer, but who the hell isn't?
I mean, he made me feel a lot of things as well. I don't think that he's a good parent necessarily. I do think he tries. I think he tries a lot more later on in Dahmer's life, but I mean, both he and Dahmer's mother, like, abandoned him, and he was, like, 16 or 17, I think. Like, he was an older kid when that happened. Like, he was in high school, so it's not quite like they were abandoning, like, you know, a 5-year-old or some you know, young child that couldn't take care of themselves. But, you know, obviously the impact was major on Dahmer because it gave him these, like, insane abandonment issues. And it is like the perfect storm. Like, that's why, like, kind of what I was meaning earlier is that you can't really point to just, like, one parent or even both parents, like, all sorts of things kind of had a hand in making Dahmer into who he was.
Of course.
So it's like, yeah, of course, if his father had not been so homophobic and had been more accepting of him and like present in his life and not quite so like the toxic male, like you can't show emotion, right? Like, because that's a big thing too that he does. Perhaps things would have turned out differently, but there's obviously no way to know, and you can really only speculate about those kinds of things. His mother, the way that she's shown in the series is very unlikable. I find her just an awful human being. I think that even, like, it sucks because it's like she is just a person, you know, just like anybody else. And she even is like trying to do some help or some good with helping. I thought it was at like a battered women's home in the beginning, like when she gets a job. But anyway, just the way that she talks to Jeffrey and the way that she talks to her ex-husband and everything is just so horrendous. Yeah. And so just, I can't imagine.
She's manic.
Yeah. Just the idea of a mother like treating their child that way is, I mean, these are the people that shouldn't be having kids, right? But she is manic and does have mental illness herself. And I don't know quite what to make of Jeffrey's dad in the end sort of admits to having thoughts like similar to the way Dahmer thought. But the way he sort of describes them, he's like, I thought about hypnotizing a girl so that she could do whatever I want, and I've thought about like killing people. But I think that really that's him putting blame on himself again. Yes. Because people have all kinds of thoughts. Like, there's intrusive thoughts that happen all the time, and not everybody acts on those kinds of horrible things that pop into your head. Because you're more than your thoughts, like, you know, which is why it's also very interesting that, you know, Jeffrey, he keeps talking about it being like a compulsion. Like, it's not really that he was insane in the way that he was like unaware of what he was doing.
Right.
He was very cognizant of what he was doing.
Yes.
When he wasn't blackout drunk, but he was compelled to do it. And so I find that really fascinating because I think that that's probably the case with a lot of people who are killers, that it is this like addictive compulsion. And it's very interesting too that he does have an actual substance abuse problem. So there is that addictive personality in him already.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I also want to point out that there are some people that were talking about how this show tries to make Jeffrey Dahmer cool and sympathetic, and I didn't find this to be the case at all. I think that Evan Peters is just cool in general, and so maybe there's a likability factor from the actor that you bring over to it. And Dahmer's a human being. Like, even though his actions are monstrous, even the most horrible person can have likable qualities, right? Like, Dahmer was out there being a person, and there are lines that he said, like, if I was hanging out with a guy and he said this stuff, or even when it was in the show, yes, he's a monster. Yes, I hate him. Yes, I'm glad he's dead. You know, all that stuff. But there's moments where he's funny. There's moments where, you know, he can be somewhat charming. There's moments where he says things that are witty or, you know, whatever. That's just being a person. So they're depicting him in a natural, real way. I never thought there was like slow-mo shots that were like trying to glorify his actions, where he was like looking cool and this and that. And so they're talking about that, like kind of being disrespectful and this and that. This show doesn't feel disrespectful to the victims or anything to me at all. Yeah. You want to see something like that, you can go watch those movies by that guy who did like the Nicole Brown Simpson and the Aline Wuornos and those freaking movies where like Nicole Brown Simpson, I think is played by like Mina Savari or something. He made a few of those kinds of movies. Those things are insanely disrespectful. Those things are like making a joke, a mockery out of it, and like adding these supernatural elements and turning these characters, like, this person has no, you know, respect for the victims and anything. So those are the kinds of movies. But this, never once did I feel like that. In fact, this show does such a great job of illustrating pain and like systemic racism and mental illness and everything it swings for. I think that it pulls off really, really well. And God, there's just so many things you could talk about in this show. So many scenes that are just crazy impactful, that piss you off, that upset you. And this show is never fun to watch. When you find these certain things out, these things happen, and you're just like, oh no, that happened? Like, what does the world come to? Like, how did these things happen?
Oh my gosh.
We could sit here and talk about them for an hour, 2 hours, and there's a lot to talk about. We just talked about an hour and 45-minute movie for an hour and 45 minutes 2 nights ago. A 10-hour show, we could probably sit here and talk about it for at least 5 hours. But we don't have that kind of time.
It's definitely not fun. Like, every time we sat down to watch this, I was just kind of like, it's just a huge bummer and that's, obviously that's like an understatement, right? But like, it does not get you in any kind of mood where, it's weird. I feel that way no matter, like, we've watched a few different true crime documentaries somewhat recently, and each one of them, although this one is obviously the dramatization, but we've watched some others, and they're scary. They're really scary because they're real. And yeah, it's awful to think.
Yeah. This is the definitive adaptation of Dahmer's story. I think that there's no necessity or need for any other fictionalized version of this story. Like, they really kind of did it all, right? If you want a little bit more of an intimate version of this very specific part of his life, you can watch My Friend Dahmer, which is more of his teen years in high school. That Dahmer movie with Jeremy Renner before he was anybody. We've definitely had different depictions in the past, but this chronicles pretty much everything. His obsession with the occult and Satanism and Exorcist 3 and Return of the Jedi, and then like his forgiveness and path back to redemption through the Lord with his baptism and his born again Christian nature and his fans and getting sent money and like women sending him nude pictures of themselves and being like, I'm your number one fan, and that stuff is just, it really is like, it's mind boggling. Like, you had that 20-some-odd-year-old girl who was trying to marry Charles Manson before his death. She was like 17 years old when she started coming to see him, and he was like 80. And it's like, what is wrong with these people?
So messed
they just
up.
More than anything, I think they just want attention.
I think
like they want to be immortalized through these guys' actions. They just want to be noticed. They just want to be seen. Dahmer is a very, very interesting case, though. This is something I kept commenting on throughout the show. Dahmer is nothing like any other serial killer I'd ever seen before, because Dahmer does have compassion and empathy to a degree. He specifically drugs, he even brings this up when he's being killed. Like, I drugged them so they couldn't feel anything. Like, he didn't want them to feel pain. This wasn't his thing, right? Like, a lot of killers, like, they want to be dominant and they want to feel this, like, control, and they like to make people hurt. It makes them feel better. And that's, of course, me just generalizing. There's so many different kinds of killers for so many different reasons. And Dahmer did want to be dominant.
Yes, he did.
But not in that way. Like, he very much was like, he drugged them to kill them. And then when he'd drill into their heads, he was giving them a lobotomy so they wouldn't leave. But he thought that they'd be happy with him.
Yeah.
Like, he was delusional, of course, but like, he really seemed to care about his victims, which is super weird. And the fact that he like wanted to consume their flesh so that they'd be with him. The dude had the ultimate, like the most nth degree possible of abandonment issues in the history of an abandonment issue.
Yeah.
He just never wanted anyone to leave him.
No, yeah. I mean, he definitely wanted the dominance and control, but he wanted love. Like, he wanted affection and everything. And that's
sad.
It's very sad. Because like you were saying earlier, there's these moments where like he's portrayed and he has these, like, we have glimpses of him. Like, for example, in the episode with the deaf man, he like dates him for a while and he's like happy, and there's this side of him that you're seeing, and even though you know he's already killed like people and it's, you don't like him, but you're like, wow, like he could have been happy, like he could have been a normal person. And that's really where the sadness comes, is in seeing the potential there for,
and he suppresses his urge.
Yes,
he lets him leave.
Yes,
which he's never done before, right? Yeah, in the show. And freaking kid forgets his keys and comes back
horrible.
and gets himself killed over it. Now, this is hearsay. This is, what Dahmer is saying, because we weren't there. I'm assuming they're going off of what Dahmer told them. Like, I wanted to hit him over the head. I wanted to keep him here, but I let him go. And he actually suppressed that urge because he really did care.
He was trying
for
to
this
trust.
Kid.
He was really trying to trust that he'd come back.
But when he came back, it was just like too much.
Yeah.
Right?
It's like, no, I'm not going to let you leave again now. And that's, I mean, I think Evan Peters does a great job at depicting the shark eyes too, because there's a lot of scenes, especially during the trial, just throughout really, where he is so emotionless. Like, there is nothing going on in his face or his eyes. And it's scary. It's really scary, because I know that that's like one of the hallmarks, right, of like these killers, is that their eyes really do give them away. And I think that's very fascinating, because obviously we have that, the whole eyes are the window to the soul saying, and there I think is something to that, because, we obviously do a lot of communication with our eyes, and when you see the emptiness there, when there should be something, there's it's kind of like the instinct, or the just really instinct that something is off.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Evan Peters is definitely gives my favorite performance by a male lead in a show this year. I think that he portrays a killer as good as anybody I've ever seen. He really loses himself in this role. He nails the accent, the mannerisms, just kind of the he's not only apathetic in his performance, but he's also like terrifyingly patient and calm about everything, no matter how intense the situation is. Even when he's talking about him getting the death penalty, or making jokes about like, I tried to tell them to kill me and they just gave me 900 years, and like he has an understanding of what he's done, but he doesn't. But man, his performance is so layered. Seeing those kids out front of the apartment complex, like pretending to like get killed and taking pictures of it, and then the girl who lives there comes and breaks the camera, and then she gets arrested for that. Those are those scenes where you're just like, oh my god. Like, they put this in here just to piss me off, didn't they?
Well, okay.
I just want to just
people make jokes about like atrocities that have happened all the time, and I do think that there is like the difference is how long, right, has it happened. Like, with something that happens really recently, it is that this is too soon. Like, there are people actively suffering, and there still are people that are, like family members that are still alive, obviously. But there's a lot. I've seen TikToks, right, of people kind of using audio from the show and making jokes, out of different dialogues, like, 'cause he says some things, right, that are just like, when they're taken out of context, but also when that it's like from Jeffrey Dahmer, like, it adds to the joke. But I don't feel like those things are making fun of the victims. They're using Dahmer as a joke. And I mean, that's just kind of one of the things that humans do to cope with tragedy, is 100%. That there's a point where you have to make not light of it, but there's just comedy that comes from it because you're so uncomfortable and it's so awful. And if you don't make a joke out of it, like, it can be really difficult to deal with. So I do think that it's a blurry line, right?
Sure.
To say, like, what is an appropriate joke and what is not. But with these guys in the show, right, because it's just very soon after, the victims, that is so horrible. And I cannot imagine anybody doing that. And the fact that, that she gets arrested for smacking the camera out of his hand is it just adds to, like, look at this area and the police are super racist. And
sure, I mean, she calls the cops how many times?
Oh my god!
She's screaming like, "I hear somebody getting attacked. I brought you down here. There was a kid bleeding from the head. I tried to get you to come back. I've reported multiple times. There's smells coming from here.
Oh my gosh!
This and that. The cops never come.
Thing?
But when a white guy has a camera knocked out of his hand by a black girl, they come there and arrest her that night.
Yeah.
Right. It just shows you, like, it's insane. You just get so angry. You're like, come on, man. What the hell is wrong with you? It's
unacceptable. It's unacceptable, yeah. And the smell thing to me is so insane because it's like death has such a distinct smell, and for nobody to be taking her seriously and like the other people, because it's not just her, it's other, like, tenants in the apartment building. They're like, yeah, there's a smell. Like, what? It's just crazy. It's so crazy.
And everyone's going to have their opinion on all of this, right? On if the show should ever even have been made, or if jokes about this stuff are ever okay to make, or this and that. We all have our difference of opinions on those things, and yours is valid to you and ours is valid to us. So we can debate that as much as you want, but at the end of the day, people have a difference of opinion on that kind of stuff. I definitely think there's things in this show that are funny, and making light of it is it is a coping mechanism for me, right? Like, some people might see that as weakness, like, oh, you just can't deal with your emotions, so you got to make a joke of it. And it's like, well, that's how we decide to do it, right? Like, I would rather laugh than cry, so I'm just gonna laugh. It takes away the power of that thing a little bit, so that you just don't feel so nihilistic towards life. Like, when you try to fully take in the weight of the Holocaust, your brain wants to just be like, I don't want to be here anymore. What's the point? If humans are that horrible, like, I don't want to trust anyone. I don't want to ever be around anyone again. How can people be so awful when you know about Dahmer and Gacy and all the other Bundy and Gain and all those people? When you hear about it and you know it's true, you can't process it. It makes you hate people. It makes you, like, you don't value life as much, because you're like, well, what are humans anyway? This is all we are capable of, and you start to focus on the wrong things. And sometimes they're more easily digestible when you can kind of break them down. They're almost like boggarts from Harry Potter.
Oh, like the
ridiculous, and they make it funny, right? It's this horrible thing because it tries to come out and scare you, and the only way to dismantle it and take its power away is to laugh at it, right? And that's kind of like something like this, where it's just like it draws so much energy away from you that you're kind of like lashing back at it, and kind of trying to dismantle it a little bit so it's a little bit more easily digestible for your brain.
Yeah.
So that's the whole point of making humor and light of horrendous situations for people who seem to like not understand why people make fun of terrible things. It's like, we can't cope with it otherwise. It makes us suicidal. It makes us hate everybody. It makes us want to regress into like hermit mode and become a recluse and just be like, I don't want to ever see anyone again. Leave the shit at the door.
Yeah. Well, and also, what's that? It's like a theatrical, like, comedy is tragedy plus time, right? So I think that they're definitely very close to each other in terms of like the intensity of the
emotion
emotions.
that it elicits.
Yeah,
sure.
Because I mean, this is kind of a tangent on that, but even like, I often, when people are laughing sometimes in films or just in real life, like it almost looks like you're crying. You know, like that sound and the expression is very similar.
Very close.
And sometimes my brain gets them confused when I see people emoting, and I have to kind of like figure out what's going on to put it in context. But yeah, I mean, I don't, as you said, there's maybe some moments that are like unintentionally funny in the show that we're laughing at because we're coping with it. And making our own jokes out of, but the show itself is very dark, and it really does a great job at showing just how important the victims, and that they aren't just the victims of Jeffrey Dahmer, that they are people that lived and had hopes and had dreams and families that cared about them, which is definitely something, you know, that is the one of the major themes of the show, is that the victims go like unnoticed or sort of sidelined to the killer. And that is something that I think, you know, we see even today with you know, mass shooters, where there's a lot of push to not put their faces and names on televisions, because something happens where it's like there's an encouragement to like rise the ranks, right, and be like, I killed the most people. There's like a competition that happens, and I think the same thing can kind of occur with serial killers, where they have this level of infamy, and you know, especially with like the comics and the fans and everything. And I think that people could obviously see the show in the same kind of way, like you're getting an attractive, popular actor to play this evil person, but you know, from what I've seen, I haven't seen a ton of pictures of Dahmer, but he wasn't like hideous, you know, like he was a normal looking guy. So there's people that look all kinds of ways out there that are awful. So I don't think that really has any like standing, but I definitely can understand why people would be upset to see depictions of this, you know, especially because it is now very popular. And I don't know. I mean, it's complicated.
Come on, that's just gay stuff.
Oh my god,
kills me.
But
I think it's so funny. How many times have I said that line?
So many
since this show.
But it's
I'm like,
so
that's just gay. That's just gay stuff.
It's funny because it's so ridiculous.
Yes.
Like for that to be the like what he can say, and they're just like, oh yeah, just gay stuff. Like I'm not gonna look into that, because then I might get infected with the gay. Yeah. Like all of that stuff. It's just, God, it's so hard to fathom.
We kept trying to come up with a TikTok. I had plans to make this TikTok where the cops were coming around the house. I even bought the cop outfit and everything to make the video. Mm-hmm. Where I was Dahmer and I was the cop, and then she was the concerned neighbor, and one of my kids was going to be the kid who was attacked. And it was just like, cops be like.
Yeah.
And, you know, cops and Dahmer be like, and it's just like, he's the cop's supposed to be walking around the house and be like looking at obvious like evidence of crimes.
Like dead bodies.
And I'm just sitting over there looking like Dahmer, being like, no, that's just gay stuff.
Yeah.
And the cop be like, ugh, and like moving away, and then you bring over the kid, and you're like, look, and my daughter's like 9, right? And you're like, look, and he's like, and I'm like, she's 20. And the cop's like, see, ma'am, she's 20. It's like, this kid is clearly not an adult. You know, I had this whole plan, but it never came to fruition. It's a shame. But one of the reasons I ended up not making it is because, you know, we did get some comments on a Dahmer video that we made about The Exorcist 3, where people were like, this isn't funny, and you shouldn't make light of Dahmer and whatever. And I was just like, I don't want to deal with that shit. Yeah. Right? Because some people just wouldn't find it funny, but that's just gay stuff line. It's gonna live in my vocabulary forever. I think it's so funny. Mm-hmm. But that's that. We could talk about so many scenes. We could go through every episode. I'm glad I didn't take notes, because that would have taken forever. But you tell us, what were the scenes that really got you? What were the moments? You know, we could talk about in the comments. We saw it all. We have something to say about every single scene. It's too much. I think just talking about it more in a general broad strokes like we did, and a couple specific scenes that really, really hit us. Mm-hmm. The Lionel stuff for me specifically. That's the really impactful stuff. But everything impacted me. There was not an episode where I wasn't engaged, involved, feeling all sorts of different emotions, mostly negative, almost completely negative. But yeah, man, wild show, but really amazingly well done. And I completely understand. If you're somebody who's like, I don't think they should make this, don't watch it.
Yeah.
And I get it.
Just don't watch it.
Now, should they give money to the families from what they made off of this show? 100%.
Oh, yeah.
100%.
I don't even see why that would not be a thing.
But as far as I'm aware, that's not happening. And that's
crazy.
That's a shame, for sure. But putting that aside. Great show.
Yeah.
Definitely one of the best of the year, but man, a hard watch. Not fun at all.
Really, really rough.
So that's that. Let us know down in the comments. Tell us all about your gay stuff. And we'll talk about it. Other than that, guys, bye.
Bye.